So good evening, welcome, and thank you all. I'd like to thank Cooperatives first for sponsoring our event, and to the BC Co-op Association, thank you for their support and use of their Zoom account. My presenters, Seth Leon and Joey O'Brien, for your engagement and the time that you're spending with us here tonight. And to all the attendees for being here tonight to learn about cooperatives with respect to our topic of sustainable energy cooperatives. Before going any further, I wish to express gratitude to the Secwepemc people whose territory, Secwepemc Ulu, I've lived, worked, and played for most of my life. And as a point of interest for those folks who don't live in Kamloops, we live at the confluence of the North and South Thompson rivers, and we call this Kamloops, and that is the name where our name comes from, Kamloops. Sorry, I'm realizing I have people waiting in the waiting room. Apologies there, in the middle of my territorial acknowledgement. So the word Kamloops means meeting of the waters, and that's where Kamloops derives. So housekeeping, I'd like it best if we could all keep our cameras off during the presentations and also mute. And it looks like everybody's done this. The presenters are good right now, and that you can choose to turn your mics on or off and your cameras on or off. And so we actually didn't really get around to determining whether or not questions during or at the end of the presentations, but feel free to write a question in the chat. I'm pretty good about taking a look at that and then asking the question where it works, and or we will have time for the questions at the end of the presentation. And all of the presentations and the recording will be uploaded to our website, and it'll be under the Kamloops Public Market Cooperative website under the Resources tab. So without further ado, I'm going to put the agenda for the evening up here. So we'll go through some introductions. If you fellas would like to introduce yourselves first so that people will know who you are and what you're all about, we can do that. Or I have given people the opportunity to do that right before the presentation. So you can let me know what you'd like to do, but I'll start with myself, and then that'll give you some time to think about what you want to say. And then after the introductions, I will talk about what is a co-op. We'll have Seth talking about the Community Generation Project Incubator. The Bow Valley Green Energy Cooperative will be covered off by Joey. And then at the end, we'll have takeaways and questions. So I will start. I am Daphane Nelson. I am an idealistic community builder. I have past involvement with local food groups here in Kamloops, including the Kamloops Food Policy Council and the Farm to Chef Collaborative. I have volunteered for local businesses on this Community Futures Loan Committee and worked as a lender with a large financial institution. After working there, I went to work for one of my clients and met the chair of the Interior Savings Credit Union here, who asked me to join the board. So I was nominated and elected the second go around, but still it was worth the effort, because that's where I fell in love with the cooperative model during the onboarding process. It was a brilliant mix of business model and people working together toward a common goal and giving back to the community in a holistic manner. So I was asked to work on the Kamloops Public Market Cooperative as a result, of my involvement with the credit union. And so I developed and incorporated it as a founding member, a founding director. And I took the Co-op Zone Advanced course on cooperative development to shed more light on this model. And here we are. This is one of my volunteer opportunities with the Kamloops Public Market Cooperative. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the Kamloops Public Market Cooperative. It is a proposed amenity here in Kamloops. We're here today under Cooperative Principle number 5, Cooperative Education and Outreach. So the Kamloops Public Market Cooperative was founded to create a common space where local producers and consumers could come together and share the bounty of our region. With the physical location on hold, we decided to participate in the Cooperative Principle Education about Cooperatives. Pre-COVID, we hosted 3 in-person events on varying topics and decided we could easily pivot this offering to an online format to allow for more participants and more obviously avoid any issues around social distancing. So this is our 3rd webinar, or 5th webinar to shed light on the potential applications of the cooperative model. And so now if you, Seth or Joey, who would ever like to go first, would like to maybe do a quick introduction and talk about yourselves briefly.
Seth, do you care who's first?
Go ahead, Joey.
All right. My name's Joey O'Brien. I live in beautiful Canmore, Alberta, where the sun is set and the temperature is going to rocket down to -3 tonight. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started about 10 companies in my lifetime. One of the fun things, I guess you could say, is I've owned or resurrected or brought out of bankruptcy 4 alpine ski resorts in my time. I'm a little bit of a business rescue guy. I founded a company in 2014 called Sustain Driven. The vision statement for that company is, we wish to be able to explain to our grandchildren in 20 years how we had a material influence on the world's climate crisis. Within my world, I try to contribute 1/3 of it towards volunteer activities. And the Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op absolutely fits that. In fact, it's pretty hard sometimes to determine whether or not I'm working or volunteering, because a lot of them intersect. And we'll be talking about the Green Energy Co-op and what we've done, what we've accomplished in the last 18 months a little bit later.
Hey, well, thanks so much for having me, Daphne and Joey. It's great to see you taking advantage of fall in Alberta.
Yeah.
My name is Seth Leon. I'm the manager of cooperative services at the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I've been with the association for 9 years. I think the co-op structure is just an amazing way to put people into the economy. I have a background in economics, and I think that studying it, you see a lot of things of how do we square the circle, or how do we make decisions more efficient and more effective for where resources are deployed, and how to make strong communities. So I'll talk a little bit more about a project that has a big co-op focus, and then you'll hear about Joey and the great work that he's doing in Canmore.
Thank you both. I had a hard time getting my mute off there. Thank you both for your great intros, and looking forward to hearing more about what you have to share. So here we are. I'm going to introduce now the concept of a co-op for some of the people on the line who are not familiar with them. So here we are. And I love this definition, so I'm going to say it out loud. Co-ops are democratically owned enterprises owned by members who share a common need, and say cooperative is the best way to meet this need. So the highlights there are where cooperatives are beautiful and different. So the members benefit from the service that they've come together to provide to either themselves or others. And I guess the others would be other members of the cooperative. And one of the things that the other aspects are the triple P bottom line, where they consider not only profits, but also the people and the planet as well. And we'll learn more about how beautiful this entire concept can come together with sustainable energy here soon. So why cooperate? I put this slide in last time, and because I thought, well, you know, people are attending these and maybe not even really thinking about the cooperative model in a fulsome perspective. So I thought, well, okay, why would I want to cooperate if I was going to work on a project with other people toward a common goal on a need that I had identified with them? And a few things came to mind, so I thought I'd share them here. Access to human capital. And I like to say, Bob may be a builder and Martha might be able to market his skills. If they work together, the potential is much more than if they were on their own. And that's just one way of looking at it, where you can say they're all builders and they're all building toward the same goal. It just really depends on the way that the co-op has come together but the idea of everyone working together, sharing their skills is one of the beautiful pieces of this, the cooperative model that I love. And sharing resources, in a cooperative model, you don't have to hoard your resources. Why does everybody need a car or a boat or a skill saw, and on and on and on? And if we all share, there could be less waste and overall positive impact on the environment. So another reason to potentially share, to come together and cooperate, and to create community. Now more than ever, we need to come together in community. And I was talking earlier with one of the presenters about the debate last night. I indicated I didn't watch it, but many people did. And there is a real need in our world to come together in community. Instead of being divided by making us compete for scarce resources, we can cooperate. So what I mean by that is, instead of the markets making us compete for scarce resources, we can cooperate and come together in community. And I like to be a little cheeky and say, why not? Why not cooperate? We don't have to compete. So I like to put this little video on, and I realize I have to share my computer sound before doing this. So one moment, and please enjoy. I was turning up my volume and stopped it by accident.
Ownership matters. It gives people a say in the things they care about. Being an owner in a business, for example, gives people motivation and a stake in its success. But over the last 30 years, the number of people who have control over the businesses that shape our lives has become smaller, not larger. It's no surprise that when you ask them, people say they have no influence in their workplace, over businesses, and over the economy as a whole. Cooperatives, however, offer a solution. From the outside, they may look like any other business, but inside they are very different. They're owned and controlled together by the people closest to the business: employees, customers, residents, suppliers, not distant shareholders. They have an equal say in how the business is run, and they even decide what to do with the profits. And cooperatives work. There are nearly 7,000 independent co-ops in the UK. They're found in every sector, from high street retailers to farmer-controlled businesses, cooperative pubs and credit unions. Some of our most famous brands come from cooperatives, from champagne and parmesan to Lurpak butter and bird's eye peas. Even Barcelona Football Club is a co-op owned by its fans. Co-ops contribute £37 billion each year to the British economy and boost UK productivity, innovation and entrepreneurship. And they work for the 15 million members who together own the UK's co-ops. Cooperatives give people, in fact all of us, more control over the things that matter. What do you want to do together?
I must admit that every time I watch that, I forget that it's from the UK and that I need to find a Canadian-based, similarly short and sweet video. And if anybody has any resources or thoughts on that, I'd love that. But I really like it. It defines a cooperative in a nice, succinct way. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the 7 cooperative principles. They're all here on the screen for you to see, but I can go through and talk about them. The open voluntary membership speaks to the fact that it isn't mandatory and everybody who is there wants to be there. Democratic member control, the members elect the board and they are in turn responsible for the cooperative functioning. Cooperation amongst cooperatives. So this here is a great example of how cooperatives are cooperating within the realm of the cooperatives, and there's a lot of other cooperative developers and association members on the call today too, so that's really lovely to see. Autonomy and independence, they're not beholden to anyone but themselves. Member economic participation refers to the share purchase at the beginning when you are becoming a member. There's, depending on the type of cooperative you are involving yourselves with. There may be a small share purchase or a larger share purchase if you're working on something with a large capital investment or something along those lines. You can get into that if you ever do want to start a cooperative. Concern for the community, and I like to remember that these are social enterprises and truly likely one of the original social enterprises. And educating, training, and information, sharing information about cooperatives, that's why we're all here today. And types of cooperatives, there are many different types. Consumer co-ops are where folks come together for basically purchasing powers, sort of a good way to look at it. But a producer co-op would be a group of producers who want to come together, maybe for joint advertising or transportation if they have a similar product that they want to get to market. Financial cooperatives are credit unions. Worker cooperatives are employees who come together wanting to have a better work environment or an environment that works well for all the people involved there. Community service and cooperatives are put together to provide a service to their communities, and they're usually, I believe actually or always not for profit. And then we have investment cooperatives where people can come together and pool their funds and get a return on their investment and invest in really great projects around their communities. Multi-stakeholder can bring together producers and consumers and workers. So any number of possibilities out there. I mean, I'm sure there's a finite possibility, but I like to think of it as infinite. And housing cooperatives, there's people who live in group housing or even apartment style housing where they're in cooperative housing and are able to benefit from that community as well. So that is my quick overview of cooperatives, and if there's any questions, please feel free, or we can now move into our into Seth's presentation, and I will stop my sharing, and I need to share with Seth. One moment here. Oops, there you are. Okay.
Great. Okay, I'm now the host. I'm the captain now.
You are the captain, and I will mute.
Great. Okay, well, thanks for that awesome overview of co-ops and jumping into the set. Sorry, I'll just get these slides set up and then I can get in there. I guess I should have maybe just in the introduction, just a little bit about the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association. So we're very similar to the BC Co-op Association. Actually, we're doing quite a lot of work together, and I see Andrea is on the line here, and it's been a lot of fun to collaborate, as well as seeing this common mission of building a strong cooperative sector in Western Canada. And by doing things like this, by raising the awareness of co-ops, and what's the strategic advantage of cooperating and having more cooperative businesses. And I'm sure a lot of people here are following the situation with MEC, with Mountain Equipment Co-op. And I think it's really challenging people to think of, why cooperatives are important, and really how do we build structures that reflect the values of a community and meet community needs. So I won't talk about MEC today. I'm going to talk about opportunities for community generation. And I'm going to talk about a project that I worked on that was a lot of fun. And hopefully that this will frame some of the key pieces that go into connecting cooperatives to community generation, to increasing the generation of renewable energy, and really thinking, focusing on the idea that if we can think like owners, like ownership thinking is a key part of co-ops, right? It's an ownership group. That's a great way to maximize local benefit and to take on big projects such as a solar farm or a community generation project. So I have slides, we'll get into it. Today I want to talk a little bit, building from what Daphne introduced us with, around like why cooperatives. So when we're looking at solving a problem in our community, why would we cooperate? You know, why would we work together? And what are the advantages? What's the strategic advantage of a cooperative? I'm going to talk about this incubator to show how like more a little bit on the technical side, but seeing the connection between the structure as well as the technology and the business model that's there. And I'll refer to some of the lessons learned. So if you're looking to do some similar work, or if you're looking at a solar project, maybe there's some insight that can be shared. If there's any questions or if anything's unclear, just jump right in or use the chat box to go from it. So why co-ops? So in Alberta, where I'm based, in 2017 or 2016, the provincial government introduced the small scale generation regulation, which allowed smaller producers to connect to the grid and sell electricity into the market. So we have a deregulated energy system. Oh, my slides are clicking along. Where, you know, basically if the grid operator says that you can generate electricity, you're able to do that. You can get into the game, as it were. And so they wanted to make smaller generation that's more distributed. Sorry about that. To be a part of this. And then within that category of small generators, they said communities. So Indigenous communities, post-secondary, not-for-profits, faith communities, municipalities, and co-ops could fall under this category. And there was supposed to be some support around some price stability as well. They put in quite a lot of support to help lift these communities, people that aren't typically generators, to get into the game of generation. And I'm going to talk more about what community generation looks like and how co-ops are a strong fit for it. The other reason why co-ops are a strong fit is that, well, one, we already have cooperatives that are in this space, and you're going to hear from a really exciting one a bit later. As well, we have cooperatives that are in the retail space. So Alberta Cooperative Energy and Foothills Energy Co-op are two consumer co-ops that are providing electricity and natural gas to the consumers, as well as offering renewable options. And then, of course, we have the distribution of electricity and natural gas in Alberta make up a large part of our cooperative sector. So when we look at utilities, when we look at community ownership and the provision of electricity, there is, you know, a bit of a track record here in Alberta. And I think that really shows the model of co-ops. Of course, when we think of community generation, I don't know why that's clicking along. Often we're thinking about, you know, this is the end result. This is the picture that we want to see. You know, a community standing in front of their project, and that's kind of the headline. That a community has identified a need, they've pooled their resources, and they put it into something that's really exciting. And they're thinking about their energy future, and they're the owners of it, and they have control over the energy future in their community, and they've done the work. And we see pictures like this from all over the world, actually, where we see a lot of uptake of renewable energy. We often see a lot of community ownership. And there's a lot of reasons for that. When people own the asset, you know, you get rid of the not in my backyard, the NIMBYism. People, you know, you have that community pride that comes together. And this is, you know, a picture. This is a community energy co-op in England, which, you know, isn't terribly sunny, but they figured out how to do it. And I kind of get a kick out of it, that when we think of the, you know, the solar resources in the province where I live in Alberta, you know, we have way more sun. If they're doing it in England, why not here in Alberta, right? But I'll get into the nuts and bolts. So going back to kind of the cooperative structure and why co-ops are a great fit for community generation. And here I've kind of mapped out what are some of the key pieces of what goes into a cooperative. Of course, there's the cooperative principles. It's incorporated under the Cooperatives Act. They're democratically controlled, and the pieces that Daphne spoke to at the start of our webinar. But these are some of the pieces when we think of that go into a cooperative, say from a strategic side to say, well, like, why would we do a co-op? So the idea of, well, there's a big challenge that we need to own something together if we're going to accomplish that. So if it's, say, access to a market, or let's say it's a grocery issue or food access issue, owning a local asset is going to be important to meet a local need. In the ownership of this asset, it's going to help accomplish financial goals as well as non-financial goals. There's an idea of, we're going to pool risk and we're going to share rewards as a result of this local ownership or group ownership. And it tends to be a long-term time horizon to say, we want to meet a need in our community, but this isn't a need for next week. This is a need that might exist for the next 20 years. Or we want to do things that have a long-term, make a long-term impact, and we're thinking of a long time horizon. Typically, when we think of comparing, say, a cooperative to a for-profit corporation, corporations tend to think in quarterly profits. A co-op might think in a 5-year plan, and their investment decisions and how their strategies will reflect that. Rather than trying to make short-term gain, they're trying to solve a larger problem. And then at the end of the day, the purpose of the cooperative is to add value to improve the life of its members. So these are some of the general pieces of, why would you form a co-op? Is, you're forming a cooperative to meet a need, to meet financial and non-financial goals, to be in it for the long haul, and to really build a strong community. So when we map that on top of community generation, we can say, well, there's local energy needs. So this is a great starting point for even when you think of your own community, and even if you have an idea for a project, right? Is, there are energy needs. You can get a sense of, how much energy is being consumed in your community, where that comes from, and who owns it. Then we can look at a distributed generation solution. So this is when we think of community generation, is that we're looking at putting the generation of the electricity where it's being consumed. And when we do that, we can have increased efficiency. We're not building the generation to serve the entire grid or the entire province or the entire region. We're localizing the challenge, and we're looking at distributed solutions. We often see this reflected in other cooperatives when we think of, say, a cooperative that's maybe a small grain terminal that's serving the needs of a group of farmers rather than an entire agribusiness conglomerate. It's really localizing it. So we're able to take the local energy need and look at a distributed generation solution that's there. In the decision, when we're looking at the feasibility of the projects or the broader project goals, we're looking for the return on investment. So a lot of these cooperatives are structured as investment co-ops, and Joey will speak more to his structure, and they need to have a return on investment. There has to be a viable business model. But when we own the asset, when we own the solar farm, what are the other goals that can be met? If you're building a massive infrastructure project, that's going to mean jobs. That's going to mean an opportunity to change, how energy is consumed. Maybe there's an energy efficiency project. Maybe there's electric vehicles. What are the other things that could occur once you own this asset together, and that the goals for this asset are to build a strong community, not solely a return on investment, but other benefits that can be accrued. I think this is where communities can get really creative and really unlock a lot of that potential, that human capital and social capital in their communities. Again, a cooperative is a limited liability corporation. It has the ability to offer cooperative shares. It can raise the capital that's needed for these projects. They are quite large when we're thinking they are multi-million-dollar projects. Even when we think of some of the initial feasibility costs, they are quite expensive. So we need a structure that can, pool the financial requirements, and that it has a strong board that can steward those funds to be able to meet the goals of the cooperative. When we think of some of the other benefits and that long-term vision for the community and for energy transition, it is generating electricity. Maybe it's a megawatt, maybe it's 5 megawatts. But you're also doing other things. You're controlling the cost of electricity for the next 20 years. You might be making it more feasible to have electric vehicles in your community. because you're able to control the price of electricity, the cost of, switching to electric buses or setting up charging stations for electric vehicles might look a little different when you're trying to repay, a solar farm. And really thinking of the grid of the future. There are, when in Alberta, our grid is built for large coal-fired power plants that are going to be coming offline. We're looking at new sources of generation as well as a new grid. That local ownership can play a role in that. So again, some of these long-term pieces. And then at the end of the day is how does the community ownership of a solar farm or a wind farm or community hydro increase, maximize the economic benefit and really retain that in the community. And I think when we look at energy transition in lots of other places in the world, is that it tends to be owned by large players. But when we think of, one, we can put more unique solutions that create more benefit, but they have to be owned by the people who live in that community. And if we're going to have local ownership, we're going to need a co-op to steward that asset for the long term. So again, just trying to map over, kind of answer the why co-op question, is that strategically they have elements that have a great fit with owning and stewarding and maintaining, a big piece of infrastructure. These are some of the community benefits when we think of that are embedded within a solar co-op or a community-owned asset. Is really first and foremost is the return on investment to the member investors who live in that community, as instead of those proceeds leaving the area, right? It is a local infrastructure project that can be quite substantial. So we're thinking of local jobs in the short term, and potentially other green collar jobs moving forward. Distributed generation definitely brings in some new tools that are interesting. When we look at the conversation around energy efficiency and spinning off into other activities, owning the generation is a key piece of it. I find the energy efficiency one really interesting because we think of the cost of building a megawatt of solar versus the cost of abating the electricity through better energy efficiency retrofits. But that's probably another webinar topic there. These are just some examples again of other solar co-ops that have been successful. Solar Share, which is based in Ontario, they have a really strong track record in terms of raising capital and building portfolios to invest in projects. The regulatory environment in Ontario, they have some price certainty, which enables these projects to be feasible. And that helps the economics of the project, but they have been successful in terms of showing that a cooperative can raise a substantial amount of capital and deploy it into projects that are going to have a community benefit over a long time. As I said, unfortunately, they're in Ontario, but a great case study to look at and have some excellent tools that are available. In Saskatchewan as well, that they're adopting a similar model. And then here in Alberta, we have some solar co-ops that are in the early stage development. Sorry, these slides keep clicking ahead. I apologize for that to come through to it. So now I'll talk a little bit about some of the work we did with our ComGen project incubator. This ran through 2019, and it was supported by funding from Energy Efficiency Alberta. And we worked with a firm called Peters Energy Solutions that was our technical advisor. And these were, we held 3 workshops in a one-day event. And basically what we did is we provided, if there were groups that were working on a community scale project, so a project between about 500 kilowatts up to about 5 megawatts, that they fit the community criteria. So an Indigenous community, a co-op, an irrigation district, a municipality, that they could access a group of engineers that would do a pre-assessment on their project and offer some coaching. Then we brought them together for a 2-day workshop where we ran through some of the key pieces around ranging, basically like energy, solar energy or renewable energy 101, to build them up to speed, to be able to take their projects to be able to go out to their community, to be able to speak to its key components, to gain support in their community and have a direction for moving forward. For a lot of these groups, this work that they did enabled them to interact with developers and to be able to understand the project costs and how to go from a group that's interested in energy transition, or a co-op that has a green, an energy transition mandate, to having a clear project that could meet those goals. So some of the things that we focused on was understanding the technology. So how does a group of people that are concerned about climate change or greenhouse gas reductions or wanting to build a co-op, is how do they get up to speed on these things to be able to have enough expertise to engage their community, as well as work with the other stakeholders to have a strong project. So we did a lot of work on understanding the technology. What's a kilowatt, a megawatt hour, a megawatt. What's the how does an inverter work, and those pieces, to kind of have a general understanding. As well, as I mentioned, we have a deregulated market here in Alberta. So how do you become a generator? I think a lot of our projects are framed in, how do we abate greenhouse gas, or how do we, reduce our carbon footprint? But this is more, more based on raising that understanding of, how do you generate electricity and how do you sell it into the grid? So understanding the market factors. And as well, the application and interconnection process. So again, some of the key technical pieces, project development and feasibility. So what does it take when you're saying, well, a municipality has, say, a piece of brownfield land that they'll lease to a solar co-op or a group that wants to generate electricity on it. What are the environmental and wildlife assessments and noise assessments that go into getting that project approved? And as well as being able to connect into the grid to have a license to be able to sell electricity. So based on those pieces, then looking at the economics of the energy projects, the feasibility and the repayment period, to then build a financial model to be able to repay that. So I've covered a lot of ground in terms of what we reviewed, but basically the key piece was moving from a group of people that wanted to, say, form a co-op that's going to be have a green mandate, to understanding, the feasibility, the business plan, as well as how to become a generator. And I found that there's a lot of components and getting into that piece. At the end of the day, we helped 20 projects go through their pre-feasibility, and that represented about 80 megawatts of generation. One of the projects that was in our incubator received funding from the province to advance it. It's a really interesting project called Renew Well, where they're taking orphan wells and converting them to be solar project to generate solar energy. So some really interesting energy transition pieces that are there.
Seth, I don't know if you saw there's a question in the chat, if you wanted to take a look at it now, or if you wanted to wait till the end.
I'll circle back to it at the end, if that's on.
Perfect. Oh,
Yeah.
That's good. I just wanted to let you know there's a question, and so for in that, I'll hold off asking any of the questions in the chat until the end.
Great. Oh, awesome. Thanks. That is a really good question. It gives me a minute to think about it. So some of the lessons that we learned we're looking at, having to think like a generator and how that impacts the feasibility of the project. That it's, trying to sell electricity at a time, if there's offtake agreements. So perhaps your group is generating electricity and there's a large industrial, maybe a manufacturer or a large customer in your community. Could you sell power to them over for the long term, right? And that idea moves, I think, from saying, well, we want to have a solar farm, but it's like, what are you going to do with it, and how are you going to sell the electricity that you generate, and how will it be feasible? So that shift in thinking, and that requires, an understanding of the regulatory environment, the technical aspects and the economics of those projects. So really just building capacity on that side. But within that is saying, well, once we own the asset, what are the other spin-offs that we can have as well? What does that return on investment look like from the perspective of the cooperative? So the return on investment might take place over, say, a longer time period. People might be looking for, not a super high rate of return, just enough to get their investment back and to make an impact. But I think like once a community starts moving around owning the asset, other opportunities could come out of the woodwork. Location is another big element that came into the project because the interconnection costs can be quite high. A lot of groups do get quite fixated on the location and the visibility of the project. However, the long-term costs will be impacted. So being able to be a bit nimble, and I think that again speaks to localizing the issue and being a distributed solution, is that you can move generation. If you're a bit flexible about where you want your project to be, you can actually save a lot of costs. And it might also help with some of the partnerships in terms of where you're located. Lastly, there is a lot of work that the group can do to get started. When we think of the resources that are out there, Decentralized Energy Canada just put together a guide that is quite extensive, and some resources to build the capacity of community generators. So that could be a co-op or a municipality, and to get up to speed to be able to have enough information to get into the game. As well, things like the global solar and wind atlases, you can actually do a pretty good assessment of the wind or solar resources in your community. And then you could compare that to your utility costs, perhaps an energy audit. So basically to be able to say, could we generate enough solar to power a solar farm to offset these utility costs, and start to get almost like a back of the napkin kind of assessment of whether, it would be feasible. And moving from there. So in terms of getting started, some things, sorry about that, to get started is really about getting the right people on the bus. I think Jim Collins, who wrote the Good to Great books and a number of things, is definitely, I think that's something that he speaks to. But you're going to be looking at a pretty long multi-year project. The development process is going to be quite long, and you're going to be having to leverage a lot of private capital. You're getting your members to invest in these projects. So you need a really high functioning team that can work well together, that has a long-term vision. And I think that investing in that, in getting the right people on the bus, building their understanding of the sport that they're playing and how to win, is a key piece, as well, that they're going to be in it for the long haul. I think this second piece around having this challenge statement of, how might local ownership of energy generation increase economic development outcomes? This is, kind of a rough challenge statement, but I think the idea that if you're looking at engaging other strategic partners, whether it's a municipality or a large energy consumer in your community, is that if you can answer this question, you might be able to build a broad enough network of support to be able to make the project more feasible and have those partnerships that will build in for the long haul. Some of the things that you can start to work again to get started to dig into this question and really understand it in your own community is, what are the local energy needs? What are the attitudes towards renewable energy? What are the partnerships that are there? Are people interested in, and would they want to be part of your co-op, and would they invest? And then lastly, that location piece. I think once once you have the right people and you have an understanding of this question, is to be able to put together a one-page summary, having some sense of the pre-feasibility. So how big will the project be? Is it 20 megawatts? Is it one of those little like solar flowers that you see that are really, really neat and to build visibility? And that a clear call to action of how to get and how to get involved if you're looking to build out the membership, and that people understand what they're getting into. And if you're the main proponent for this project, is that you'll have done a lot of this work, that you've framed up, you have an idea of how much it's going to cost and what's the business plan and how long it'll take. But at the point when you're going out to engage your community is that you've answered a lot of those questions and you're inviting people to come along and to participate, but you've probably already done a lot of the heavy lifting. So those are some of the things that we've covered. So really, like, we're seeing a ton of where there's renewable energy, there tends to be a lot of co-ops. Strategic, like the cooperative structure has a lot of elements in it that can offer that provide a strategic advantage for community generation. When we think of localizing energy, when we think of raising capital for a massive infrastructure project, all these pieces, there is a really nice fit between the co-op and community generation. Through the incubator, we found that there is a bit of a learning curve when it comes to understanding the economics of these projects, of the regulatory environment, of the technology. But I found that groups can learn this. It isn't rocket science. It's a bit of renewable energy, but you have to invest in building that capacity. And then here on this slide of looking at how some of the pieces are to get started. So that's my presentation in terms of community generation and co-ops, as well as the incubator that we ran. I'll take a look at these questions and hopefully I can do my best.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thanks, Seth.
Okay, so I see the two questions here, and maybe Rob has answered some questions. So what about payback periods, and how does it differ from the other usual projects? And then Rob is mentioning here, payback is not a good measure for projects with a 30-year lifespan. Return on investment or net present value is better. The cooperatively owned solar projects we are doing here in BC have an internal rate of return of around 7%. Yeah, that's amazing. I think, Rob, you answered that question. I think that's the key piece. So in terms of the project, like it could depend on the offtake agreements or the power purchase agreement. That's going to be a key piece to being able to sell electricity to a counterparty, whether that's through to your I guess it's BC Hydro or to another group. But that understanding like what that offtake agreement needs to be to generate revenue to then repay the member investors is going to be a key piece to it. I think having some benchmarks about what your investors are going to need, it needs to be really clear at the start, and that those questions need to be answered before you get started. And Joey's going to address the specifics with his project. All right. Yeah, I will find the link to the Decentralized Energy Canada, their recent community energy resources. And the last one here from Sheena, I understand that each provincial region. Yeah, okay, this is a really good question in terms of funding, because that'll be the key piece. So if it's coming from private capital or grants, or from having a power purchase agreement with with the counterparty. So one group saying that we'll buy the energy that you generate for a long term, and that should help with the revenue model and the feasibility of your project. So yeah, you're right. It's going to be each province will have a different regulations. Federally, there is something that's pretty unique because the federal government put out a request for information around procurement for their federal buildings across the country. And it was aimed at Alberta because so much of our electricity is generated by coal. So any solar procurement or renewable energy procurement in Alberta is going to displace coal, and that's really good for GHG reductions. But long story short, I think with like the federal, like looking at procurement or social procurement, I think this is where we could really do some good work in kind of principle 6 in co-ops of cooperation among co-ops, is that could we have offtake agreements with, say, a massive credit union like Van City, if they're looking to accomplish their energy transition or GHG reduction goals, is would they buy power from a community generator? And that would help with the feasibility of the project, as well as provide access to, you know, the attributes or some of the carbon credits that are there. Anyway, I think that looking at from the procurement side, and hopefully there'll be more federal options given their interest in offsetting their own operations. I should also mention, kind of in that other piece, is that Business Renewables Canada, and they've been a good broker for mostly industrial scale, but I think through some of the social procurement lenses, and at a certain point, I think that this could be a category that could be very interesting in the market for, you know, to allow to, you know, kind of matching community generators with other consumers. So I'll put that link of their work in the chat as well. But thanks for the opportunity to share about this work. I really enjoyed it. I'm excited to hear Joey's presentation and to hear what people are up to in BC.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Seth. And don't forget, you have to relinquish control back to me. I have Joey's presentation on my computer. And actually, when you're talking about the cooperating amongst all the cooperatives, that's actually where we met. I met you at the Cooperate Now boot camp in Vancouver at the BC Co-op Association. I can't remember exactly when that was, but that was when I first heard about you, when all the great things you were doing with the Alberta Community and Co-op Association. Is that how it's called?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we go way back.
I know, we kind of go way back. We go way back in my involvement in cooperatives. So that's a long time to me. And thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so while I get Joey's presentation up here. Oops,
so while you get it up, can I set up the framework of my communication?
Absolutely. I meant to say more, but I'm glad that you did.
Okay. So I love having an interactive opportunity with people. So two different ways that we can interact if you have questions. One is you can pop a question into the chat box, and if I can answer it immediately, I will, or I'll placeholder it. The other one is if you want to ask the question in person, just because it's maybe too long or you don't really know how to word it, just pop your camera open, and we'll find you and we'll do our best to try to answer you.
All right.
So,
let's
Bow
do
Valley
this.
Green Energy.
All right. I will be advancing your slides at your request. So please let me know when it's ready.
So let's talk about what is the Bow Valley. The Bow Valley is the water drainage from the headwaters at Lake Louise, through Banff, through Canmore, through the MD of Bighorn, and through the Stony Native Reserve, basically to the outskirts of Calgary. Geographically, we think of that as our footprint. So are we at the last slide? It's hard to tell. What is the next slide there? Yes, go back to the front, please.
Apologies, I just have, okay, I've done something here. Just one moment.
I can continue laying the framework out while you wrestle with technology.
Yes, I do apologize, everyone. This is the right one. The front and the back slides looked similar to me, and I apologize.
They do. Okay. All right, so that's our vision statement. Renewable energy, and we're not just solar. So while solar might be the first item off the menu, it's not the only thing we're working on. We're working on a lot of different projects at this point. My role within this organization is I am not the chair. I am a board member, one of the founding board members. I am chair of the Technology and Business Development Committee. And so what my task is with the people that we've put together in my committee is to fill the opportunity hopper with viable choices. And then at a board level, we're going to pick and choose what we're going to do first and second and third, et cetera. Next slide, please. So we're incorporated. We are a for-profit co-op. So while the co-op membership shares at $100 per are not for profit, The individual projects will have an opportunity to earn a IRR, return on investment, to help offset and to encourage people to invest. Next slide. Okay, so where did we come from? So the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley is a charity created by primarily the town of Canmore, but it also interacts with Banff, and its funding comes from there. And it is in charge of the biosphere and all the actions we can do in the biosphere. We have a bit of a unique environment around here in that we have, between our one end and the other, we have 10 authorities having jurisdiction. So to get them to play nice in the sandbox is a challenge. We have Parks Canada, we have IDs within Parks Canada, Banff, Lake Louise as examples. We have Canmore, which is a more conventional town. We have the MD of Bighorn, which is a larger footprint, and they have their own issues. Next, we have the Stoney Native Reserve. We also have Kananaskis Parks, and they've created their own ID within there for their permitting processes. So how do you get everybody to play nice together is a challenge. The Biosphere is one of the tools that tries to do that. There was a community generation capacity building grant opportunity from Energy Efficiency Alberta, and the Biosphere went for a feasibility study, created a steering committee, and the baby ended up becoming the Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op. Next slide. So our value proposition is to be Bow Valley's first member-owner developed of renewable energy, enabling our local residents and business to actively participate in greening of the grid and the economic benefits. If somebody has a successful business, or they can put solar on the roof, I have 10 kilowatts on the roof above me, they can just do it. But there's a lot of enterprises that can't do it. So as an example, two of the first projects we're looking at are on churches. They don't have the capital for that, nor do they really have the expertise. So that's where we fit. Next slide. So there's sort of a chronological list of everything that we've done. It sort of ended in May there on that slide, and I was going to try to jam more stuff in there. But since May, we've continued meeting once a week. We've also had full day meetings as we move things forward. We've done a good job of doing all of that. Plus, we've got our first project in place. We raised the money for the first project in 15 minutes through sophisticated investors, because we need to be in existence for a year and have a whole series of things built before we can appeal to the non-sophisticated investor. That is somebody who wants to throw in a couple hundred to a couple $1,000s into something and doesn't have $1 million worth of assets or income over. There's a whole series of criteria for sophisticated investors. Concurrently, we've got two pathways. One is we need to prove that we're real. So we're fast tracking a project on a church. We did a little hand around. We came up with the $25,000 necessary for that to happen, and we're fast tracking that project. Our goal is to have electrons flowing by the new year. Concurrently, we needed to do a lot more work to create all of the landing instruments and the requirements for non-sophisticated investors so that they may invest smaller amounts for projects as we go forward. We've done all of that stuff, and we're currently going through the last stages of formalizing our bylaws and all the landing documents necessary to meet the requirements. Next slide. So there's more information on what we've done to try to get to where we are. We haven't done our AGM yet, but we will be pretty soon. Next slide. So Alberta is a bit of a challenge. We have an unregulated, quasi-regulated market. It's different than a lot of other provinces. You and I could set up an energy marketing firm, a retail firm tomorrow. Quicker than, not as quick as tomorrow, but we could do it that easily. There's a lot of energy retailers. One of the advantages of breaking up the retailers versus the producers versus the line companies is we have some of the lowest energy costs in Alberta, which is wonderful for Alberta. A real challenge when you're trying to do solar PV, as an example, on a comparative basis, when it's so inexpensive to buy brown power from our grid. The other issue is there's micro, which is behind the meter. So my roof is micro. The energy goes into the house, surplus gets pushed to the grid, and I earn this within this. Small scale could be best be described as a soccer pitch or a large space somewhere that has a whole bunch of solar on it that feeds to the grid. One of our challenges with small scale is you need an interconnect agreement. An interconnect agreement has a minimum cost of about $75,000 to do this study and then leading to the agreement. When you amortize that $75,000 cost over something that's not that big, the economics doesn't make sense. So it's really challenging for community-based solar projects in this valley, which we don't have any flat land that isn't developed or owned. It's really challenging to do that. So we've almost exclusively focused on the micro because that's the sweet spot for where we are. Next slide. Our business model is described there. So we've got grants and loans, membership shares, membership loans. That's the left side. Then you've got your projects, which is solar or otherwise going into a host, and then their meter. And then we have an energy retailer that absorbs the excess energy. And as long as we can find places where they consume energy and we have some sort of roof or other structure to generate energy off, then our model works. Okay, next slide. So we've done some advocacy, I will say quite unsuccessfully to this point. We figured out a sweet spot in our economic modeling where it produces a decent IRR, and that's a project of $100,000 to $400,000, produces a really decent IRR. And we were very excited. Now one of the reasons why we were able to do this, I think, is because our board is filled with almost entirely entrepreneurs, as opposed to people who might be more focused on looking for grants. We decided to build our economic modeling entirely on grid energy. And then if we find grants or if the province comes up with other funding, that increases stuff. So back to the churches, different depending on the denomination, they have between 20 and 50% grants for solar projects. We didn't make the assumptions when we did our business model that grants were going to be available. They become an add-on that help us. We were pretty excited to come up with this modeling. And so I approached through our local MLA to the energy minister and said, we've got something here which is pretty cool. It'll help the province meet its greenhouse goals, green energy and the grid goals. And could we present this to you? So we presented 3 things to the Minister of Mines and Energy. And one was, here's the cookbook. It's for free. We'll give it to you. If you want it to be disseminated to every community throughout the province, that would be absolutely wonderful. Here it is. We'll fancy it up for you. 2 is, can you take a look at the small scale interconnect study requirements? Because that's a bone that makes it pretty hard to make the economics work. And number 3 is, could you just take a look at the regulations for the micro? Because it's not going to make the grid imbalanced if we get overproduced to 125%, because the current regulations only allow you to build to 100% of your annual capacity. They said, thank you very much. They asked a whole bunch of smart questions. They had 5 or 6 of their staff on the phone. And 2 weeks later, I got a, thanks a lot, we're not interested letter. So as I say, we're doing advocacy, but we haven't done a tremendously good job. Where we are doing a good job is the town of Canmore has declared a climate emergency last year. And the challenge is that our land use bylaws and all the regulations around developing don't talk to the climate change strategy that the town has. And so within advocacy, we're pushing pretty hard to get the town to make the left hand and right hand talk. As an example, when we're looking at the land use bylaws and the associated documents that are coming out right now from Three Sisters, which is our largest developable piece of land, which will take us from about 14,000 citizens to 30,000 citizens, there's nothing in it about greenhouse gases, nothing. There's very little about it, about green energy at all. Yet over on the climate change document, there's a whole bunch there. So we've done a lot of pushing on the town to try to make those two connect. We've done a bunch of issues in terms of supporting initiatives relating to the wave of stuff that we think is going to come from the federal government and potentially from the provincial government on economic revitalization and infrastructure planning. We don't know if we've succeeded there yet or not. All right, next slide. Next steps. So first project we've selected, business planning is happening, financial modeling we've done, membership drive is not yet happened. We're going to do that once we have all the landing documents done. Investment share offering documents, again, that is with our lawyer right now. And when it comes back, we're good. Source funds, the first one was very easy, the next couple, but we want to get into the community. So we need to create the structures in place so we can accept the $5,000 level investments. Project installation and electrification, our goal is to have electrons flowing by the new year. And I talked about the cookbook that we would willingly share to anybody who was interested, because part of our goal is, of course, to be a good corporate citizen in every way. Next slide, please. So that is, in a quick sense, what we've done, where we're going. I wanted to segue a little bit at this stage before we dive into the questions. The fun part for me is the technology and business development. So we're looking at hydrogen, we're looking at community-based thermal, we're looking at community-based cogen from construction and demolition wood. We're looking at small-scale vertical access wind turbines, because where the Waste Commission is, just to our east, it's windier than hell. And the conventional wind turbines, it's too windy and too shifty for that to work. But vertical axis turbines don't overspeed, so we're looking at that. We're looking at batteries, because some of the potential clients we're looking at have a spike of energy, and we can figure out a battery model that works for them, that works. We're looking at the golf course, and we're communicating with the golf course, and we've suggested strongly that they go to primary metering and then develop some sort of, and there's lots of software for this, energy management systems that are on their side of the meter, because they have many different buildings, they have pump houses, they have garages, et cetera. And we're looking at how do we manage to help them keep everything on their side of the fence. We're looking at, through partnerships, Rotary. So Rotary International in June has declared their 7th area of focus worldwide. And Rotary's in 212 countries worldwide. There's 1.2 million Rotarians worldwide, and they get stuff done quickly. And so we're looking at partnerships with Rotary and seeing how we can make this happen. And I just happen to be in charge of that committee for our Rotary Club as well. So it's pretty easy for me to talk to myself and try to build models. We're also looking right now at UtilityNet. And so that's the last item I want to talk about. And it's unique to Alberta. UtilityNet is a white branded energy retailer. And communities, organizations, businesses can become the face. So an example is in Olds, they have for a decade, an energy marketing company. But when you call them up or send an email, it's actually UtilityNet. They're just the face. They bring in all the clients. The net profit that they've earned over the last decade has allowed them to reinvest in the community $1 million in 10 years in green energy installations. So with our co-op, we're doing an active exploration right now of how we can consider becoming an energy retailer or energy marketer with UtilityNet doing all of our back of house material as they do for 20 different companies, or maybe even 22, Seth, in the province. There. You feel like you've drunk from a fire hose? That's my life in this model right now. I'm totally open to any and all questions that anyone wishes to ask.
Thank you so much, Joey. That was, I mean, fairly fire hosey, but the great thing is I'm hoping that we can share your slides, and if anybody's interested in being able to take a closer look, they'll be available on the website under our resources tab. So. And
feel free, give them my connection information, so if questions pop up, they can fire me the questions, please.
Wonderful. Yes, that'll be cool. Maybe what I could do is make a slight adjustment to your slides and put your contact information directly into them.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I will do that. So we have gotten to ourselves a little early tonight to the questions stage of the presentations, or the format. The idea being a co-op cafe and sharing ideas and asking questions is absolutely something that we encourage here, and the safe, small space to do that. So please feel free. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And feel free to unmute yourself or type your questions in, chime in, sing, dance. Can anybody do a cooperative interpretive dance? Oh, there's a question here from Sheena. There are a number of solar projects in Canmore. What has been the town's reception? What has the town's reception been to your organization?
That's excellent. So a bit of background. We have a, I'm trying to think what her title is. The town has hired an energy expert, a green energy expert, utilizing one of the federal grants that exists. They have a goal of getting and matching the IPCC Paris Accord goals, which is 30% green energy by 2030 and 80% green energy by 2050. This is not a intensity, this is an absolute number. So meanwhile, we're going from 14,000 permanent residents and 5,000 weekend residents, or 5,000 weekend doors, it's about 25,000 weekend residents. We're gonna be growing to 30,000 residents. So we have to decrease our energy intensity by 4 times in order to meet any of these goals. If the town puts solar on every single roof that they own, they can only accomplish 17%, but their goal is 30. So they need an organization like ours to be working in parallel with them. Because if we can get every roof in this town to solar PV, we're well over the 30% number. If we can work with enterprises like Three Sisters, who are going through the process right now of setting up the framework for their permitting, maybe we can get them into district energy and begin to offset energy costs through district energy. One of the neat things that happens in every community is our local waste commission receives 1,000 tons of construction and demolition waste wood per year. Right now, they process it into chips and ship it off to become animal bedding somewhere else. That's energy. Why don't we close the loop, bring that back to a either cogen or thermal energy device somewhere. And as we're building new roads in our developments to our east, we put thermal energy in there as one of the underground services. An easy thing to do, hard to sell when they've got an absolute, I'm gonna build exactly the same way I've always built before, and don't confuse me with new stuff. So our challenge is to convince the town to force their climate change strategy document into their permitting process. So it's a round peg and square hole issue that we're dealing with right now.
Yes, it can tend to be that way with government agencies. Anybody else with any questions? Oh, Sheena says thanks. And, you know, sometimes it can be hard to feel like you want to speak up at something like this. So please feel free to send me an email and I can connect you with these presenters, or check out the website for the presentations afterward.
I see Rob Baxter's face popping up there.
Yeah, I was just going to finish that and then yes, absolutely. Sure, Rob, and then Thevia also has a question. So Rob, please go ahead.
Yeah, so we've done a couple of projects here in BC, and of course we're trying to do more. One of the issues that we run into is people just don't seem to understand the idea of PPAs. I mean, we're mostly doing behind the meter PPAs. Sometimes we're also looking at some front of meter PPAs. There was a couple of times recently where...
When you say PPA, maybe not everybody knows what a PPA is.
Right. So it's, yeah, sorry, I should have explained that. So it's power purchase agreement.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
And like there was a couple examples recently with provincial government entities where we said, we'll install solar for free. It'll help you meet your climate targets and you'll save money. And they're like, no, we don't want to save money. We don't want solar. So I just wondering if you have and it's same with some private businesses, we're going to save them 10% on their energy bill and they're still really reluctant to do it.
So we have a bit of an advantage in that I've got 6 years of data right above me. And so it's not theoretical. And so we've used the data from my solar above me as we move forward. And so when people go, yeah, but we go, well, here's the hard data. Here's the hard data. And I'm not in the sunniest part of this valley. So I'm sort of in the bottom of the valley. The slopes to the north that face south are far sunnier and we get a fair bit more sun. So that helps to start with. But we live in Alberta. Our premier is Trump light. We're all based on oil and gas, and that's the mindset. Even though it was only 17.7%, I think that's the number of our total budget in the heyday, the mindset is that we have to completely be hooked to oil and gas. The beauty of that is Canmore Banff are weird in the Alberta context. We're far more ecologically focused. Almost everybody who lives here chose to live here for the social values that are here. So it's a little easier to sell in this area, but the pure economics is based on the past. So as an example, 6 years ago, when I put my solar on my roof, I paid $3 a watt. Right now we're getting quotes in the range of about $1.58 a watt for projects of this size. So the price is almost half. So what may have been true in the past is no longer true. The other item which we have in Alberta, and Seth, you're totally familiar with this, is we have a solar club. And Solar Club is an organization that aggregates all of the MEs. So I produce about 1/10 of a ton of GHG offsets per month. That $30, $35 is not worth me aggregating and trying to market. But imagine if you had all of the MEs in the province. So Solar Club does that. And the result is I get 22 cents per kilowatt for exported energy to the grid under Solar Club. If you build your solar project to the maximum allowable in your house, it takes the payback from being 12 to 15 years to being 5, 6, or 7 years. Suddenly things really start to make sense. And so that's another advantage that has popped up in this province.
Yeah. If I could build from that, I think that's kind of like the theme of the distributed energy is that it can be a little more dynamic, and then that'll impact the repayment periods. The example that always gets me is the Starland County, which is kind of dead center in our province, gets a ton of sunlight, and they did the municipal district did a small subsidy for farmers to try to get them into solar, and this was prior to any solar programs from either provincial government we've ever had. And basically it was a $5,000 grant to a farmer if you were going to put solar on your farm. They found that once the farmers got into solar is that their consumption behavior changed. Like they had barns where they left the lights on all the time because when they were installed, they just said, well, it's fluorescent, the price of electricity is so low, like we don't really see the difference. But once they were generating and they all have apps on their phones, just seeing how efficient their systems are. And then they started to turn off the lights and the decisions around it. So long story short, that impacted their repayment period. So really the $5,000 subsidy was to try to get the repayment period under 10 years. They felt that farmers buy equipment with a 10-year amortization period. And they said it would probably be similar if they were to invest in solar. So let's try to think of the same repayment period. But they were able to get down to about 7 years. So that it's an interesting piece. But if that decision was being made across the entire municipal district, they wouldn't be able to get those local efficiencies. So I think you have to think about that in your project where those marginal gains can occur, and those can be quite substantial over a multi-year project with those pieces. In terms of the Solar Club, I see there's a question coming through. Yeah, so Alberta Cooperative Energy, which was previously Spark Power, which is the retail co-op, they have. So I'm an owner member. with ACE, and I get the green energy options, and that, what the co-op does is it's aggregating the generation from residential producers in Calgary. They have a pool for Edmonton, and so basically I'm paying a higher rate to be able to buy the green offsets from my neighbors and people in my community that way. So there are some, like, I think on that consumer side, and that we have that advantage, and to see more options that way.
Yeah, it's not like, I mean, we have 15 years worth of data, so it's not the data. The economics, you know, it's the, like, you know, the payback is basically immediate because they're going to have savings immediately. It's just people aren't familiar with the PPA model, I don't think, and it's hard to convince them to do a PPA.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So we don't talk PPAs, we just talk economics.
Awesome, thank you. There was a question from Thevia. How can a small business like a winery or restaurant get involved in a co-op project? Assuming they can't do it alone, how can they get involved with communities? And just so that everyone knows, sorry, just one quick thing. There's a lot of really great links in this, in the chat here. So I can make it a text file, I think, and share it on the online resources as well. So apologies there, but just so everyone knows, they can be saved.
Is the winery in BC or Alberta?
Hi, it is Thevia. It is in BC.
Okay, Seth, maybe you could take a kick at that. You're more familiar with areas that are broader than I am.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess I'm thinking of going to a vineyard in BC as winter is starting to roll into Alberta. I think that there's lots of ways to do it. So the way, in terms of like the investment co-ops are set up, which are typically how, you know, Alberta Solar Co-op and Bow Valley are incorporated, is that you can have corporate members. So 10% of the shares of the members typically can be corporations. So the business could be an investor in that co-op. As Rob mentioned with the power purchase agreements, perhaps that's the offtake agreement that's making the project feasible. It could also be an opportunity to, say, lease your roof to the local co-op and those pieces. I think, you know, it would really having to look at the feasibility of the project and how having a private business as a partner within it. So either they could be an owner member in, say, the pool of capital and participating that way. There could be a lease agreement to have access to be able to put the infrastructure on, and perhaps through an offtake agreement. But Joey, this also sounds a bit like some of the ideas you're looking at. So what would be your take?
I tend to look at energy holistically rather than trying to solve a problem. And so a winery is going to have a fair bit of input energy. So you've got solar, depending on where it is, there may be wind. There potentially could be small scale hydro. You really only need, you know, 10 vertical feet and a flow of about 20 gallons per minute to begin to produce hydro energy. Energy from waste becomes something that's really big. And so if you look at all those pieces, then it begins to make sense. You can also look at your energy consumption relative to how your facilities are built. You know, we're all sitting in these facilities that were built to R2000. Well, BC has the STEP code now, and I love it because by the time you get to the end of the STEP code, you're building net zero. And that's only a decade, I think, out into the future. So these are the opportunities where you look at your entire energy portfolio and then try to find the low-hanging fruit that allows you to pick off the things to decrease your energy footprint. I did it at a ski resort I had on the East Coast where I created a primary meter. I had 20 meters before when I bought it. It was just a mess. And I went to primary metering, and then we developed our own internal management systems so we didn't create peaks that were very high. And the result was we saved tens of thousands of dollars per month on the usage, on the production side. I ended up, I was sending a garbage truck full of garbage to the dump on a 2 to 3 times per week basis. So I put an outdoor boiler in place, and I had at the same time I expanded it to, the day lodge was 35,000 square feet. And I ran the outdoor boiler into the boiler inside as the primary heat source, and the indoor boiler became a secondary heat source. And I took the heating costs for the entire building down to less than $5,000 per year, and eliminated a significant portion of my garbage to the dump by doing this, because we then began to purchase specifically, intentionally, to consume it in the outdoor boiler. And so then we had a pretty good closed loop system happening there with a lot less waste going to the dump. So that's an example of looking at things in a holistic fashion to try to produce a result. In a winery, you know, you're probably not burning 2,000 kVA like I was at a ski hill, but you're still burning a lot of energy.
Thank you so much for answering that question, Joey and Seth. And I do have one more question. I have a lot of clients. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. So I work as an energy analyst for a not-for-profit association here in Kelowna, BC.
Yes.
So I'm an energy analyst. I work with a lot of clients, but unfortunately, most of them are located off-grid. They're not connected to BC Hydro or Fortis BC transmission lines. So like the other businesses, they cannot think about a PPA because they're not connected to any BC Hydro or Fortis BC grid. How does this co-op concept apply to them?
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Seth, go ahead.
yeah, this is really, because is this behind the fence type solutions that you're looking for?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Are you looking at like how behind the fence type situations where they're not connecting into the grid, but it would be just the generation for their own needs for an industrial application?
Yes, so most of them are powered by diesel generators, and they are very passionate about moving to solar energy, and I don't know what to tell them.
Well, this is my take on it. There would be a great opportunity if there was a community nearby that's interested in a project. So, okay, well, actually stepping back from it. So when we think of like from the investor perspective, there isn't a ton of, oh, great. And Rob can answer this question too. This will be more enlightening. But part of it, like when we look at these co-ops as an investor co-op, they're meeting the need that like the typical investor can't invest in a local energy project. So proximity and localizing it is a key piece. That's why we need the cooperative structure that can raise and pool the capital, and that it's in accordance with the securities rules for those pieces. So that's a whole other conversation. But in terms of your project, you could see your customers saying, we want to switch, but who will pay for it? The cost to switch is quite high. But there could be a group that's saying, well, we want to see more renewable energy. We want to see a modest return on investment. Perhaps they would be the ones to come in with that initial equity to then, initiate the project, and perhaps then they have an agreement with the consumer of the electricity to then buy the asset from them or buy the electricity from them over the duration. So I think like that's a really good kind of a private community kind of partnership with the co-op as the broker and the investor on that side. But this is just really in the broad strokes. But I know in the United States that community-owned generation for behind-the-fence projects has been quite substantial. California, there are some good examples of that. And I think that's something that we're not exploring enough. And it'd be great to see some great pilots doing this, because I think, again, like it's localized, it's incentivizing efficiency, and then it's and retaining the benefit in the local communities. So it checks a lot of boxes, but no one's really willing to jump into it. It's still theoretical. But go ahead, Rob.
And then I have answers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to answer, I think there's like 3 questions to answer. So as a business, if you want to invest in solar projects, you can do that through us. And by us, it's Soul Share Energy. We've been around for, I guess our first PPA is just about 6 years old now. So we've been paying out dividends to our community investors for almost 6 years now. And you can join as a business. We do have business participants, owners, and we don't have that 10% restriction, although we try to make it, mostly for individuals in the community. So yeah, that's one way you could join. You could also look at doing a PPA with the winery. We'd for sure do a PPA. It's just the rate might be too high. We'd have to look at your what you're currently paying for electricity to see if it makes sense for you.
Mm-hmm.
And the third question about off-grid diesel, we've been looking at that quite a bit as well. We had one customer, a great example. They came to us 3 years ago and said, we don't like burning so much diesel. We said, we can do a PPA for you. Won't cost you anything, no capital costs, and we'll sell you the electricity for less than what it's costing you to pay for diesel now. They came back to us again this year and said, well, maybe we should look at it again. Basically, they just lost that. I mean, they could have saved thousands of dollars over the last 3 years if they had installed solar. So this is an example of why it's hard to understand sometimes why these people aren't doing a PPA. I noticed someone else was talking about a performance guarantee contract. Well, I mean, essentially with a PPA, it is a performance guarantee, right? Because you're saying you only have to pay for the electricity if it gets generated at a specific rate. So there's really no risk for anyone to do a PPA. So yeah, we could definitely do that. We've been looking at some larger diesel microgrids as well, doing projects on them. So that's definitely something we can help you with.
Okay. And my 2 cents on that one is that I was actually doing some work today on a BC-based cat ski operation that was trying to get its head wrapped around all of this stuff. And the flip side was, I'm part of the United Nations and their various actions that happened. Race to Zero is becoming the latest push that's going to receive a huge amount of promotion, starting with COP26 in Glasgow, starting October 12th. And they're going to put a huge amount of effort on it because the Race to Zero is trying to get the total amount of carbon down. That's a marketing tool, but how do you get there was part of what I was trying to help this cat ski operation. And so looking at the entire energy envelope and the opportunities, and is there a lot of waste going to the Waste Commission, and the trucks are coming back empty from the Waste Commission so they could bring you wood chips for free that you could drop into a cogen or single thermal unit, is all the mix that you need to look at when you're trying to be innovative. The other part is, and from Gordon on this very same topic, I installed so the local waste commission asked me, they go, look, we have 1,000 tons of C&D waste per year, and we're only allowed having a pile 4,000 tons. Right now it costs us 88 bucks a ton to chip it and move it off. What do we do? I said, have you ever heard of an outdoor boiler? They go, no. So I built for them an outdoor boiler, a 500,000 BTU outdoor boiler, and a new building for them that we built for 1.5 times code at only $137 a square foot, I add. And then put in all of their outbuildings various heat units. And so they just take the C&D wood, which they get 250 bucks a ton for, process it, drop it into this unit. The thing's so damn efficient, it only consumes 30 tons. So they still have 970 tons per year they're trying to get rid of. This might be true in many other waste commissions. And if it is, it's a tremendous source of free energy, and the trucks are coming back from the Waste Commission empty anyway. So let's consider that stuff. The other bit is there's a fair amount of work done in wood cogen, which is using a pyrolysis process that produces electricity as the primary product and then thermal energy as the secondary. And so an example I give you is All Power Labs as an example of one. They've got 500 units running worldwide by people that don't even own shoes. They're that simple to run. And you talk about unproven technology. One of the biggest challenges I had with the Waste Commission job was they called this device unproven. And I kept going, there's 500 of them out there running. Well, it's unproven. No, it's not. Well, we've never seen one. That's the truth. And getting past that, we've never seen it, is the biggest challenge.
Yes, absolutely. Especially, I think, in this day and age, and I'll just read Gordon's comment out. and question, just so that if anybody can't see it. Great presentation, guys. I agree with Rob's point. Several years ago, we did a project where we did some feasibility analysis for some businesses where we showed them they would receive significant energy cost savings moving to a wood waste bioenergy heating system. However, none did, often because they thought that it was new and unproven technology, even though it isn't. Perhaps one solution is to offer some form of performance guarantee contract to help reduce the buyer's fear. And just for context, in terms of what you just said there, Joey, totally agree there. Joey needs to, and Andrea's made a couple of great comments here. Harris from the BC Co-op Association, just talking about community investment co-ops focused in getting vineyards moved to solar. They're so clustered geographically, so interesting idea there. And then Joey needs to write another cookbook on how businesses can shift to systems thinking and eco-efficiency adoptions. These are amazing stories. So just wanting to share those out loud in case people aren't going to be able to read the chat after. So.
Yeah, I'm working on a project right now. This is the private side of my company, where it's a pyrolysis process using wood fiber that produces green diesel. And one of the problems with green diesel to this point is if that's your single revenue product, then it doesn't really work out because the cost of diesel is quite competitive. So this particular technology that we found, and it took a long time to find it, has a bunch of items on the revenue stack. The next item is going to be biochar. The next item on the revenue stack is graphene. And the next item on the revenue stack is wood vinegar, because the wood fiber that comes in is 30–35% moisture content. And if it gets processed into wood vinegar. And the next item on the revenue stack is carbon credits. With all of those items in the revenue stack, now you've got a really viable business, because if you take wood fiber and try to produce graphene, it's $100 an ounce. But what if it's a secondary product within revenue stack? So this is the fun stuff I'm working in right now, and we're just finishing the technical evaluation of their new production line, and then we'll know our business plan. We've already got the money set aside. There's already investors that want to be part of this. They just need to know that it's proven. And so the world is changing so rapidly. One of my favorite slides that I like using is sort of somewhere in New York, 1901, you got one horseless carriage and the rest of them are horse carriages. 1913, you've got one buggy and horse and all of the rest of them are cars. Everybody's got a phone. The phone is 16 years from that big brick that, you know, that we used to talk on to what we have now. We're having Moore's law, which is technology is doubling in terms of its capacity in half the time. And that's happening in green energy as well.
Yes, absolutely. We've watched the Murdoch mysteries in our family, and so take New York and substitute Toronto, and right now they're talking about all these horseless carriages, you know. So it's kind of fun to see that in that environment for sure. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Kabluna of the BC Sustainable Energy Association, the Kamloops chapter. And I wanted to mention that 2 years ago, we held an event where we invited Rob Baxter to come talk to us about his soul share and solar co-ops in general. And it was fascinating. We had an audience of about 50 people, and they were mainly the people who do renewable energy in this area and others who are interested in renewable energy. And so there was a lot of interest in moving forward with a solar co-op. We had a couple of smaller meetings after that, and I think we were lacking a core group of people who wanted to move it forward, and it kind of petered out. But I have a list of interested people with their email addresses. If somebody wanted to work on developing this in the future, you could get in touch with me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Cheryl. I'll be in touch with you too. I just realized I'm on the same email list with that Gisela puts out as well. So I'll reach out to you too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. And good, very good presentation tonight too. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you take a look at a link I just dropped, you can see who the founding board members are of our co-op and sort of get a little bit of a vision of the type of people we brought together to accomplish this.
Yes, we talked about their business acumen as being a key driving factor in how quickly that you were able to uptake your project.
Yeah, what Karina won't tell you, she's got a PhD in chemistry, a master's in environmental consulting. Sue's got a master's in environmental. I'm just a dumb ski hill guy. Kamir is like 200,000 employee type projects, master's degree. Don McDermott is both an engineer and a lawyer. Like, holy mackerel. When I sit in the room, I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room. It's really quite exciting.
And sometimes that's not a bad thing.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Side question.
Oh yeah,
Joe.
so my dad started building ski resorts in Nova Scotia in 1949. So I grew up in that world. I bought my first ski resort, Martok, in 1979. Dad built Kepik and resurrected Martok. I had Martok for 25 years, sold it and tried to retire and came to Canmore for a year. 18, 19 years ago. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great.
One of the things that, back to data, in 1980, I had Environment Canada bring a Stevenson screen and put a weather screen at the ski resort. And I had 25 years of data twice a day. In that 25-year window, my mean snowmaking temperature went from -6.8 to -2.3. And it was a pretty straight line with a little bit of variability. And I realized that as soon as I get to zero, I no longer have a business because we were only 30 feet above sea level. So we were entirely dependent upon snowmaking, as most ski resorts are. And the result was I went, I need to sell this beast. And so I sold it to my staff.
Awesome. Sheena says Martok is great. Oh,
it's the perfect beginner machine is what it is.
Andrea is wondering with the next government if we could get a similar project to Seth's to incubate more green energy projects in BC. Understand it's complicated because the BC hydro and appetite may be low, but perhaps we can find a niche like Joey's group did.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think what was interesting, so prior to the formation of Energy Efficiency Alberta and the small scale generation regulation that really opened up the space to then invest in the development at the community level of these projects, all this capacity building, is that it worked. Like, I think there was a number of projects that were looking at the technical development, the community engagement, lots of different projects, and now that continue on at the municipal level with the Municipal Climate Change Advisory Committee. And so kind of, I think it's worthwhile pursuing, but also Alberta is a good example of saying, like, if you invest in training and education in this area, that the learning curve is kind of steep, but people will get there. And also when we think of these cooperatives is that they're going to invest and own the project, or maybe doing a number of different things, but they're not building it. They're not the developer. They might not be the operator. They might, maybe it's more as a partner. Now, not to say that you couldn't have great solar co-ops or worker-owned businesses that are, building and maintaining them. But when we think of community energy, it's typically through an ownership model. But you need those boards to understand it, and as well, I think, to get the uptake from the members and to have that strong member engagement, that this type of capacity building is really worthwhile. And it does take I just want to add another piece too. When we think of Alberta, yeah, we have a very oil and gas focused government and an energy sector that really has a strong culture. So putting in it, you know, there's a strong headwind kind of against renewables, but I think when people can see the local economic development impacts and that return to the member and to the consumer, so saving on energy costs, you know, making buildings that are more efficient, that works, and being able to translate it. I'll just add one story. When we ran our incubator, I held it at the corporate office for Service Credit Union, which is a great LEED energy efficient building in Edmonton. And I'm, you know, lugging in the flip chart paper and the tray of sandwiches for the workshop, all that, you know, kind of business. And I see this massive like F-350 lifted, and he has the decal with I love Alberta oil. And I was like, wow, what a strange coincidence that, you know, I'm here talking about renewable energy and this guy's here talking about oil. Isn't that amazing? And that guy was in my workshop. He worked for a business association with one of the Métis settlements. He was a Métis business owner. And he was like, we need to diversify. And I think, like, if, you know, building that big tent and that the capacity building works, but it can be really, really broad. And a lot of people are going to come to this space, lots of different reasons. And last, when we think of raising the capital to be able to build these projects, you're going to need a lot of people. So how do you have a board that can connect with lots of different groups, lots of different expertise, because you're going to need that when you go to do your project. So it's a key piece. I went way off track, but it was a lot of fun to run these workshops, and I think there's a lot of value. The group that we worked with were really excellent. I think the tools that are being built apply in lots of different places. So if we can look kind of regionally, you know, the Peace Energy Co-op based in Dawson, BC, they now have projects in Alberta. So there is a lot of collaboration across the Rockies. And I think, like, you know, conversations like this, we just need to have more of them.
Totally agree, Seth. And I think you raised a great point about the long-term nature, although we're getting shorter and shorter in our timelines in terms of, you know, the race to zero, or the, you know, the 2030 activity and things like that. But to Cheryl's point, you know, maybe we get a few people together and then we try to gather a few more people, you know, here in Kamloops. Again, kind of going back to the F-350 comment, we're about in that same boat, but there's a lot of people who are recognizing the need to make these changes and to really work together to make the change happen. So I think as long as we're having these conversations, and as long as we're willing to put ourselves out there and just kind of toe that line, like that's what we need to do. We can't just leave it up to the, you know, the Gen Zs now who are suing our government for their participation in climate change. You know, we really need to be the leadership for that generation who is looking at us going, what did you do? So totally agree. We need to come together now more than ever, and we can do it. We can do it. Sorry, Andrea made a point about Joey's worker conversion, which I thought that heard that too. That was really cool. And yes, like the engaging municipalities, so many are declaring climate emergencies, and yes, it could be a great lever as well. So all these components, like your the comment about Joey's overarching thought processes, if we could just put all these ideas together, there is the possibility of forward momentum getting us places that we've never been before, sooner than expected. I'm not too sure if anybody else wants to chime in. I don't see any cameras coming on. More comments.
Well, I'll wrap up if I may. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. This has been a thrill for me to present what we've done in our little area and to communicate with you guys about what your needs are. You're going to have my contact information if you want to continue these ideas, these sessions, and you know, we've had some fun already, but if you want to have more, please just reach out and we'll find time to do it. And Seth, you provide a really good umbrella that's much more comprehensive than our little narrow piece. And so I really appreciate you being here as well.
Thanks. It's always a pleasure to get to hang out with you, Joey, and I always learn so much. And thanks, Daphne, for having me, and everyone for the great conversation here today.
Yes, and I just want to thank both of you for your energy. I know you're an hour ahead of me, and I'm not sure if there's people across the country that are even further ahead. So I definitely just appreciate your energy and your readiness and eagerness to jump in and answer some of these questions. You know, the way that you went back and forth, you know each other's sort of where you can help out. And thank you to Rob for your contributions and all the other speakers for the contributions. Joey, just so you know, we do these co-op cafes monthly on the last Wednesday. So the next one will be the last Wednesday of October, and I'm hoping to get the fellow from the Thingery, a tool sharing library cooperative on that call. So I believe I've got him set up, so I don't want to commit to that entirely right now, but I absolutely do love these. I look forward to them. I get nervous every day before them, but I really, really love sharing ideas. And the concept is to keep them growing and share the ideas and get the information out there so more people can learn about the benefits of cooperatives and how coming together and sharing ideas can make make the world a better place, basically. That's my idealistic view.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, and Andrea says here, thanks so much, Daphne, for organizing this. Really inspiring speakers. We'll follow up, as I'd love to get a copy of Joey's cookbook and see how we might connect with Rob's group and get something going. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciated the knowledge you've shared. Joey, Seth, Rob. Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, again, thank you to Cooperatives First. They've sponsored us to be here. BC Cooperative Association has loaned us the Zoom app here, so thank you, Andrea. And thank you again to the speakers and to the people all on here. I absolutely love this session. So great night, everyone.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.